Pokemon X and Y were the first main series Pokemon games on the Nintendo 3DS, introducing us to the France-inspired region of Kalos, fully rendered 3D models, the Fairy type, as well as 72 brand new Pokemon. The flagship games of Generation 6 brought a lot to the table when it came to overhauling the Pokemon franchise. The biggest thing Generation 6 introduced to Pokemon was the concept of Mega Evolution, an ability for certain Pokemon to ascend past their final forms to an even stronger version of itself. Mega Evolutions almost always boasted better abilities, type combinations, and stat spreads than the Pokemon they were evolved from. Pokemon X and Y introduced 28 different Mega Evolutions for 26 select Pokemon. This concept was integral to the plot of Gen 6 and was heavily advertised, marketed, and seemingly overtook the Pokemon franchise for a couple years. When Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came out in November of 2014, they introduced an additional batch of 20 Mega Evolutions and 2 Primal Reversions, for a grand total of 48 different Pokemon being able to Mega Evolve by the end of Generation 6. Most of the time, these Mega Evolutions were for starter Pokemon, character-specific Pokemon, legendaries, or just fan favorites. By the end of Generation 6, only 12.1% of Pokemon were able to Mega Evolve, leaving many overlooked and less relevant Pokemon who may have needed the attention or power boost more in the dust. When Generation 7 was announced, people were excited to see the next batch of Mega Evolutions Gamefreak had up their sleeve, but they never came. Generation 7 didn't introduce a single Mega Evolution, instead bringing us the concepts of Alola forms and Ultra Beasts. So, where did Mega Evolution go wrong? Why did Game Freak decide that they wouldn't touch on the concept for 5 whole years? Well, I think they finally realized exactly what implications Mega Evolution had for the core gameplay of Pokemon. Unfortunately, Game Freak's been making their games a little too easy as of late, and Generation 6 is the biggest offender of being too easy. In X and Y, you're gifted a Mega Evolving Kanto starter Pokemon, as well as a Mega Lucario relatively early in the overall campaign. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, you're given the Mega Stone for your starter Pokemon at around the 6th gym, and before that, you're given a Mega Latios or Latias, which is a based 700 stat totaled, legendary Dragon Psychic type Pokemon. Mega Evolution in the player's hand is broken, and takes away a large amount of a challenge from a game. Pokemon games are already easy, but giving the player the ability to hit a button and all of a sudden this nuclear bomb of a Pokemon is on their side is outrageous. You ended up having to build your whole team around this one Pokemon. Sure, you could have multiple of your Pokemon holding a Mega Stone, but only one was able to Mega Evolve per battle. And because of how easy X and Y were, your Mega could basically wash every trainer, making balanced team composition irrelevant. Another one of the main problems that came with Mega Evolutions were how scarce they were. In X and Y, very few important trainers had Megas. The gym leaders didn't, and the Elite Four didn't, but some kid with 3 badges did? They were hardly pitted against you. To me, it was almost cheating to use them. Another, less obvious issue was that for every Mega Evolution, there needed to be a Mega Stone to find, collect, and store in your bag. Could you imagine doing this for hundreds of stones? There's simply not enough room in the game for that. Mega Evolution replaced traditional evolution entirely. From generation to generation, certain Pokemon were given baby forms, branched evolutions, and new evolved forms. These evolutionary additions were most common up until Generation 5, where none of the introduced Pokemon had any connection to the ones previous. They abandoned the interesting idea of expanding evolutionary families and replaced it with gimmicks. Mega Evolution is the biggest and most intrusive of these gimmicks. Game Freak bit off a bit more than they could chew. How is it going to be possible to design not only new Pokemon, expand on evolutionary families of previous Pokemon, but also create an entire batch of Mega Evolutions for already existing Pokemon? It's simply not probable. With Generation 7, they also introduced the Alola forms and the Ultra Beasts, 2 different subcategories of Pokemon. This means that in order to expand on everything, they need to create new Pokemon, Alola forms for old Pokemon, normal Evo, pre-Evos for old Pokemon, Ultra Beasts, and finally more Megas. That's 5 different categories of new Pokemon introduced, and 3 of them use Pokemon from previous generations. Something had to go, and it had to be the most convoluted and controversial one of them, being Mega Evolutions. In Generation 7, Megas were shoved into the postgame as an afterthought, and completely forgotten during the main story. I think Gamefreak realized how expansive and game-changing Mega Evolution was after they'd already pulled the trigger on it. Megas make it harder for them to develop their games fundamentally. They have to scale the difficulty differently with Megas in the mix. They have to have the Megastones be collectible, and the certain Pokemon who can Mega Evolve have to be available to the player in the game. And there has to be plot explanation for what exactly Mega Evolution as a concept is. The inclusion of Mega Evolution is so complicated that they had to introduce an entirely separate timeline. That's how much it messed with the series. Mega Evolution just didn't fit with Alola. Generation 7 introduced Z moves, which require the Pokemon to hold a crystal, and since Pokemon can only hold one held item, the Z crystals replaced the Megastones as the most important held item in the game. It was a mess, and Gamefreak knew it was getting out of hand, so they shoehorned them in at the end of the game, as to simplify their development of the main game, and to move the focus off of Megas as the most important kind of Pokemon. Mega Evolution worked in Kalos. It was integrated well into the world and the story, but it couldn't work everywhere. I wonder if by the time Pokemon Sword and Shield come out, Mega Evolution will have made its triumphant return, or if it's left as a Gen 6 mistake, shoved on the back burner forever for the rest of the series. Maybe Generation 8 will introduce an entirely new gimmick, putting Ultra Beasts, Alola forms, and Megas aside for whatever the next hot thing is. Either way, I'm very excited for the future of Pokemon, and can't wait for Sword and Shield on the Nintendo Switch. I'm a huge Pokemon fan, obviously by my channel name, and would love to talk more about some of the things facing the series, as well as news around it. Let me know what you all think of Game Freak's lack of attention towards Mega Evolution, and if you think it'll return or be expanded upon in future games in the series.